This is some Python code in a JavaScript file, and this is that same Python code running in the browser. But why and how did I do this? Well, the first part of that question is pretty easy to answer. You see, I love JavaScript way more than Python. But Python's a bit easier than JavaScript, so I wanted to bring some of its functionalities to JavaScript. But also, it seemed like a few of you did not like my last video when I turned JavaScript into Python. Just take a look at some of your comments. But how did I go about doing this? Well, it's a little more complicated than you would think. You see, to do this, I had to use a lexer and a parser. But what exactly are lexer and parsers? Well, first off, they read the symbols from an input. Then, they analyze the symbols and try to match them with something that they understand. After that, they add a meaning to what they find. Then, they produce an output with the proper syntax in the language that they understand. But now that we have all of that out of the way, let's get our coding started. To start off, I opened VS Code, opened the terminal, and created a new directory named JS to Python. Then, I cd'd into it and opened it in a new window. Then, I created an index.html file and a main.js file where we will run our code. The reason why I'm using HTML and JavaScript is because I originally tested this project on the browser, and when I tried to move it to Node.js, it just wouldn't work. And you know what they say, if a code works, you probably shouldn't change it before it breaks.
Sad but true.
So how would I want this to work? Well, I don't want to add all of Python's functionalities to JavaScript right now. That would take a little bit too much time, which I really just don't have. So right now, all I want to do is add a little bit of Python's functionalities to JavaScript to make it a little bit easier. Here are some things I want to be able to do. Number one, create variables. Variables that can carry both numbers and letters. Number two, create a copy of a variable. I want to be able to take the value of a variable and copy it into a different variable with a different name. And number three, be able to print both strings and variables. Even with these small amount of functionalities from Python, it'll make writing JavaScript code so much faster. Now let's get started with our coding. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a class called compiler. And this class is going to hold our lexer and parser, which will turn our Python code into JavaScript code. Then I'll create a constructor that takes in our Python code as text and create some variables off of it. Then I'll create an instance of this class with our Python code as text. After that, we'll create our first function named lexer. This function will analyze the text and then return it as something that JavaScript can understand. Now to start, we'll create three different variables. Now be aware that the way I name my variables aren't always easy to understand, but that's beside the point. Now the first variable, parser, will be a variable that contains all of the keywords from the Python text, such as the word print or an equal sign. The second variable, data values, will record what operation is being used and what sign is being used to do that operation. And the third variable, strings, are the strings that the text split by line, which I will use to loop through them to keep the Python syntax as accurate as possible. So now I will create the loop that will go through all of our lines from our input. Okay, now I'll add the part of the code that will do all of the logic. Now I won't explain all of it in detail, but if you want me to, let's get this video to 100 likes and I'll create a full tutorial. But for now, I'll just give you the lowdown. The first part of this loop is checking if the string does not start with an indent, because right now we don't really want to be dealing with indents. And it also checks if the string is not empty. Once that's done, it goes to the string character by character looking for an operator symbols, such as equal signs or brackets. Once it finds this, it'll splice the string at that point and go back looking for a keyword, such as the word print or a variable name. Once it does that, if it is a print function, it'll go forward and check what to print. It'll then parse all of these into our parser variable. Then it'll go through a new function which will take all that information and turn it into a JavaScript object. Now that's it for the Lexer function. Now we'll create a new function named parser, and it will have two different variables. The first one, main, will be an instance of our Lexer function, and the second one, main object, is an object that will store our Python variables and the values. It's now time to create the final loop of our project, and for this function, as previously stated, I won't explain it in full detail, but if we get this video to 100 likes, I'll create a full tutorial on it. While you're at it, if you're liking this video, subscribe too. For now, I'll just give you the lowdown. Our Lexer function has returned a JavaScript object that looks a little bit like this. This object has details such as the type, the value, name, and more. Now, for this loop, we'll go through all of the objects that the Lexer has returned, and we'll search for its type. If the type is a variable, then it will append the variable to our main object with the value. Then, if the type is a print, the function will check if the print type is a variable print or a string print type. If it's a string print type, then it will just console.log the string that's given. However, if it's a variable print type, then it will go to the main object and look for the variable, then console.log its value. With this done, we'll just call lex.parser, and now we've successfully turned Python into JavaScript. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and comment on how I should make this project better. Should I add loops or statements? Tell me down in the comments below. I'll see you guys later. Peace.